Thousands of listeners across the nation rely on Garden Variety to grow everything better. And we rely on listener support to sustain our little garden of knowledge. You can help Garden Variety flourish with a gift today. Donate now at ipr.org/donate.
This is Garden Variety, a horticulture podcast from Iowa Public Radio and Iowa State University Extension and Outreach. I'm Charity Nebbe. Loving and appreciating trees is one thing, but if you want to understand them and care for them properly, it's a good idea to be able to identify what kind of tree you're looking at. DNR forester Mark Vitosh is here today to cover the basics of tree identification in Iowa. Hello, Mark.
Good morning.
So why is it? I mean, I kind of gave an idea of why it might be important to identify trees, but why do you think it's important?
It's all about knowledge. And so we use that knowledge for a lot of reasons. And in forestry, trees grow in certain places. They have certain characteristics in how they grow together, and all those kinds of things. And as a forester, I can't manage a forest unless I know what the species are and how they work together. So identifying those species specifically is really key. So I know that this tree is tolerant to shade, or this one isn't. This one grows 80 feet tall. This one does this one does that. I mean, knowing that information makes me a better forester. If you're a landowner and you have a tree in your yard and you want to think about pruning and different things like that, you got to know what kind of tree it is, because you want to know what its normal branch characteristics are, how it normally grows in situations. If you're a community forester, how do those trees interact? You don't know that unless you know the species. The one kind of last thing is part of management is insect and disease problems. There's a lot of insect and disease problems, but they're usually specific to a particular group or particular type of tree. So, knowing that it's a pine, we know there's certain diseases, there's certain insects and certain things that might impact it. So knowing those species is really important for kind of overall management. And it's fun. It is to me.
Right. Well, and of course, studying forestry, you spent a lot of time learning how to do this, including learning how to identify woods. You carried around a bag full of blocks of wood and could identify them by smell, right? We don't actually have to go this far.
No, we don't. But in college, I had a bag of 75 woods that I carried around, and my dorm friends used to make fun of me because I'd be back there carving with my knife and smelling, and it's called, getting happy with nature.
Right, and studying.
Yes.
Studying is important. Okay, so we don't have to be as good at identifying trees as you are, and there may be some nuances that as lay people we might miss, but let's talk about the basics. I mean, you can group trees into a couple of different groups, right?
Right. So basically, in the Midwest and in Iowa, we have conifers and we have hardwoods. Conifers are also sometimes called softwoods. Conifers have needle-like or scale-like leaves. They're often evergreen, meaning that they leave their needles on all year, and they produce cones. And this is important because a pine tree is an evergreen, and it's a conifer, but it's not a spruce and it's not a fir. And so when people call me and say, hey, my evergreen is turning brown, I say, what kind of tree is it? Well, it's a pine because it's green. No. It could be a spruce, it could be a fir, so we need to know. But the fact that it produces a cone, they're all conifers. And then we have the hardwoods. And hardwoods are things like oak, maple, ash. And basically, instead of needle-like or scale-like, they have broadleaves. So we tend to call them broadleaves. And most hardwoods are also deciduous, meaning that they drop their leaves now in the fall. There are exceptions on both sides. There are some deciduous conifers, such as bald cypress and larch. There are some evergreen broadleaves, think Christmas, holly. When you get down south, southern U.S., that is an evergreen. There's other species that are evergreen. The other kind of thing about those words, they're general, because not all softwoods are soft and not all hardwoods are hard as far as their wood. There are some hardwoods that actually have kind of soft wood, but there are some conifers. We use a lot of conifers, pine and different things for structural integrity and construction and stuff because the wood is hard. So that term hardwood, softwood isn't necessarily how hard the wood is. There's characteristics with their cell structure and all kinds of details that we can't cover today.
All right. Well,
but those are the basic. We either have hardwoods / broadleaves, conifers, on that side.
All right. So once you can group a tree into a category with those pretty obvious factors, what are some of the other common characteristics that you then look to identify specifically what kind of tree it is?
Right. So you can, we can use key books. And I know there's a lot of great apps out there now that tell you what something is, but how do you know that that's right? That's why knowing some common characteristics of trees when you use an app like Picture This or Leaf Snap or some other app, you know that when it tells you it's this, that's what it is. But when you look at a key, it'll divide. It'll say it's a broadleaf or it's conifer. That's the first division that those keys make. So the things that we can look at are leaves, and there's all kinds of characteristics of the leaves. And again, remember, a needle is a leaf. It's just a needle-like leaf. But it could be shape. It could be the edges. They could have teeth. They could have lobes. But then we look at things like the buds, the flowers, fall color, bark, fruit, nuts, and cones. And then for trees that grow more open, especially in urban areas, we often use their growth characteristics. They have a silhouette that's common on white pine, that's common on sugar maple, or elms with their umbrella-type shape. That is a silhouette or characteristic that we're used to. And then for native trees in woodlands and stuff, we think about location. There's common species that grow along rivers and streams: cottonwood, silver maple, green ash, willow, sycamore, Kentucky coffee tree. And then when you get in the uplands, you're looking at oak species like white oak, chinkapin oak, black oak, red oak. And then you get in between, you can get walnut, but also on the slopes you can get shagbark hickory, sugar maple, basswood. So where you are in the landscape can help you kind of say, these are species that I might find in this area. That doesn't mean that you're not going to find a cottonwood in the upland, but typically you're not going to find a true white oak down in a floodplain and stuff like that. So where you are in the landscape, especially in native habitats, can really help you kind of, and to even make it more particular, what we might find on a north slope might be different than a south slope because that north slope is cooler, better environment, more moisture, maybe a little more shade. South, real dry. So we're going to find things like shagbark hickory, white oak, bur oak. On the other side, red oak and white ash, black cherry, sugar maple, things that like those environments. So where you are in all those things can be used to kind of bring it together.
Now, I personally want to be better at this, so I've taken a class on tree identification, and I still find myself depending on the apps. There are so many apps that will help you. You can look at the bark, you can look at the leaf.
Right.
How do you feel about these identification apps?
I think anything you can use to help you is great. And again, I think I've used some of those apps and they're way off, and sometimes they're right on. But if you can use that app to get you started and then use some of these key characteristics that we use in identification, then you can kind of bring it together. I think the apps are just another tool, but I think if we're just taking pictures and saying, okay, then we're trusting that app every time to say, that's right.
Right, and we've talked about this on other shows with the Merlin app, which identifies the songs of birds. Right. But if you see, if it says that you've got a bird from South Africa, you probably don't have a bird from South Africa.
Right.
So you do have to have enough knowledge to scroll through the possible hits to say, that doesn't make any
Right.
sense because I'm here right now.
Right. And as a non-bird person, I actually love Merlin, and I use it in my back porch all the time. And my granddaughter uses it with me in Colorado. But you're right. So I think if you have some basic knowledge, if you see something and you go, well, that just doesn't fit, then you at least have an idea. And I've been doing this over 36 years, and I still learn every day new identification characteristics and new things.
Or you run into a tree that's just a little weird.
Yeah, and go, what the heck is that? And I have this phone a friend. His name, especially if it's a weird ornamental, his name is Dr. Jeff Isles.
Yeah.
And I say, Jeff, what the heck is this? So if you have a phone a friend.
Right. But we probably shouldn't all be calling Jeff.
Okay.
But there are other, there are books and there are online tree identification keys. Do you
Right.
have some advice for other places to look beyond the apps?
Iowa State, actually, and I gave you the link, has kind of a general tree ID for Iowa, and it goes through the broadleaf conifer, and then there's a few other characteristics. If we have time, we'll talk about simple compound, alternate opposite, all kinds of different characteristics that we use when we're looking at hardwood trees. But they go through those keys, and that can also get you in the general area. There's actually a good book called Forest and Shade Trees of Iowa, and I believe, I looked it up yesterday, it looks like it's in print again, and it has great colored prints and different things that can be used to help.
Well, and you talked about compound and, the different ways that the leaves might look on the tree.
Right.
Of course, it depends on the time of year whether you're even going to see leaves.
Right.
But there are those little booklets where once you identify the kind of leaf, then you have this many options. And once you
Right.
identify the way the branches are growing,
Right.
you have this many options. Do you like those sort of choose your own adventure books?
I do. And real key, so with hardwoods or broadleaves, what is a leaf? You go back to the branch and there's a little bud. From that bud on, there's a petiole, and that is the leaf. We have a simple leaf, so you think of of oak, most maples, they have this one leaf. Cottonwood is another with a simple leaf. And then there are some trees that have compound leaves. And if you draw a stick figure on a piece of paper and then draw little things that look like leaves on each side of that stem, that is a compound leaf. And each one of those things that look like leaves are leaflets. But if someone brings me a leaflet and says what kind of tree it is, I don't know what it is.
You've got to have a little more context.
So there's some of those key characteristics that we can use to help tell those trees apart.
DNR forester Mark Vitosh. For more gardening information and tips, please subscribe to our Garden Variety newsletter. Find out more at iowapublicradio.org/garden. I'm Charity Nebbe. Garden Variety is a production of Iowa Public Radio and Iowa State University Extension. It's produced by me, Erin Stile, Caitlin Troutman, and the Iowa Public Radio talk show team. For more garden goodness, please subscribe to our Garden Variety newsletter. Just go to iowapublicradio.org/garden. I'm Charity Nebbe. See you next time.